So our next presentation is our first panel, moderated by Amy Henry, and it's on the ROI of Design Innovation, which, if you don't think you need this panel is for you.
Hi, how are you? I'm gonna.
You actually vote.
Oh, I have a. I'm mic'd up, so I'm good. And our panel is walking onto the stage. Yeah, we can probably turn that off. So while everyone walks onto the stage, I'll just start to talk a little bit about the panel because my job today, I have the easy job because we've got 5 amazing people on the panel who I'm sure you all want to hear much more than you want to hear me, and I'll do my best to facilitate. But my other challenge is we will inevitably leave you wanting more today. So we've got 40 minutes to get lots of big thinkers and lots of big ideas out on the table. So as Wendy mentioned, innovation is important to everybody because whether you are a new brand or a new product or a new organization, you're doing something that's creating a new space or innovating in an old space, or you are a beloved, established entity and you need to remain relevant. Innovation is probably something that you think about, maybe you angst over a little bit. So we're gonna make it easy today and a lot of fun, and we've got great people to introduce you to. So I'm gonna start with, let's see, I'm gonna start with Tara today, Tara Sorensen, and I'll just give you a little bit of a brief overview, but please read more about them online. We can't possibly capture all that these people bring to the table in a couple of sentences, but I'll at least try to give you a sense of the diverse perspectives that we have related to design on the panel today. So Tara is the head of Kids and Family Programming at Amazon Studios. You may have heard of them. She's a veteran of the kids space. She's created Emmy Award-winning shows for National Geographic Kids, Sony, Nelvana. Those are just a few of the posts that she's held. And in a way, innovation is probably part of Tara's everyday life because not only is she working for Amazon, an innovator in and of themselves, but she's working in a space where the very way that kids consume content is changing and is being disrupted. So what I challenged each of these folks to do is to give us one slide that succinctly shows what they think is the key to great design and innovation, right? So no pressure. So Tara's gonna start. Oh. Let's see. Oh, and this isn't my presentation. Let's see here. All right, that's okay, that's okay. So you know what, Tara? This is perfect because we've got your quote right here. So if you want to look at this, if you want to read your quote while we get set up.
The more risk you allow children to take, the better they learn to take care of themselves. If you never let them take any risk, then I believe they become very prone to injury. Boys should be allowed to climb tall trees and walk along the tops of high walls and dive into the sea from high rocks. The same with girls. I like the type of child who takes risks, better by far than the one who never does. And it's a Roald Dahl quote. I think, you want me to?
Go ahead.
For me at Amazon, part of what we're doing, innovating on programming, sort of came out of necessity. As a new player on the block, we needed to sort of stand out, and that really enabled me to think about what we were going to program and how we were going to approach it differently. I think if you look at the programs that we've done to date, they are very risky. We have done things that, for the most part, kids production companies or studios or networks don't do. And you see that in some of our programs. At the last summit, I showed a clip of Gordimer Gibbons in which we dealt with the death of a parent in a pretty sort of head-on way. If you look at our preschool programs, we're about to release a show this summer called The Stinky and Dirty Show, based on a Kate and Jim McMullen book, and they're all vehicles. Well, in preschool programming, you would never see a fire, but one of our characters is a fire engine. And so we're seeing things on our shows that feel sort of, to me, real and authentic, but for whatever reason, hadn't been done before. So anyway, I think, again, part of it is necessity and sort of standing out from the crowd. We don't have a brand that's been established over the course of 30 or 50 years, so we can be experimental, and Amazon is a place that really sort of fosters that. So
Great. And I should mention that Tara is going to talk about Anadroids, one of their shows that's just been nominated for 10 Emmys. So she'll talk about that at the end. She wouldn't say that, but we thought we should say that. So our next, thank you. Our next panelist is Kay Wilson-Stallings from Sesame Workshop. And Kay's going to talk in a second, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. She's the content queen at Sesame Workshop, overseeing creative development and pilot production for all original content across multiple platforms. She's relatively new to Sesame Workshop and comes in at a time that is ripe with innovation on the heels of their new partnership with HBO. But Kay is far from new from the content design space. So if you have seen Shimmer and Shine, Blaze and the Monster Machine. If you've seen the Fresh Beat Band or Yo Gabba Gabba, or if your kids have, you can tell them that you've met the woman behind those great shows. And so we're thrilled to have her today. And I'm going to click to her slide.
Okay, so when I think about innovation and I think about content and I think about what the goals are, it's happy kids. And the slide that I had, but we couldn't, it was too small. They had helmets on, and it wasn't because I wanted to talk about bicycle safety. It's because helmets were the only visual thing I could think of that demonstrates safety. So we're looking for happy kids where they're watching content that the parents feel is safe and exactly right for them.
Perfect, great. So our next panelist is someone we're calling our academic in action on the panel. Yes. And Liz and I just figured out 5 minutes ago that we went to college together. So that's our other claim to fame up here, or my claim to fame. But she's the professor of design and a director of the design research cluster at Northwestern. And her work focuses on collective innovation, which she defines as the study and design of technology and organizations that support broader participation in the innovation process. So if you think about that for a second, it's going to make sense. And Liz is going to talk about that. She's the faculty founder of Design for America, which is the award-winning national network that teaches design students to tackle social challenges. And Liz lives and breathes design thinking and has, from the start of her career, co-founding Stanford's world-famous D-School Design and Business Initiative as a graduate student. So it makes us other graduate students in progress feel really humble. So Liz brought an intriguing example.
The pencil. I love the pencil. I have worked on a lot of different products across a lot of different industries, and the product that remains most inspirational to me is this product because it's used by many people, many different people of ages, all ages, across the world. It can be resharpened. It's not a throwaway object in the way that so much that we have today is. I don't like that it's used for standardized testing. That's not a sport that I have with this one. But I do like that it's valued by many different people. And I think when I think about design, I think about systems design. I think about how can we have, to your point, how can we have designs that really speak to many different stakeholders? And this is one that is timeless to me, absolutely timeless.
Great. We're going to talk about technology, and we're going to talk about designing for many different age groups and whether that's possible. So I think all of these will tuck into the back of our mind.
Well, I work in the technology space, so this is like heresy to put a pencil up.
Great. So our next panelist is Crystal Prasad, and she is from, oh, no, it's not. It's Pete Jackson. It's Pete Jackson.
So easy to skip.
I know. You look alike. So Pete Jackson, Pete Jackson leads global innovation and product development for Kids 2, an award-winning design-driven company behind brands like Baby Einstein and Disney Baby. They pride themselves at Kids 2 in inventing and reinventing baby toys and gear for more than 40 years. And Peter is passionate about developing and maintaining their culture of creators, which is part of what we're going to talk about today. You won't hear from any of these folks. The next thing that you don't know about, what you'll hear is a lot of the whys and the hows, and Pete is a great person to talk about that. He holds a graduate degree in mechanical engineering and robotics from Stanford. And he worked in robotics and factory automation before coming into the baby industry. So that gives him a unique perspective in terms of kids design, and we're going to talk about that as well. So, and we have a slide here.
Is this on? Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. Well, good morning. So I think one of the foundational questions that we all have to ask ourselves when we're selling products, we're in here to make make money, is who is ultimately the judge of what good innovation, what good design is. And I think the answer is simple, it's the consumer. And fundamentally, I believe that the consumer doesn't just buy what you make, they buy why you make it. And when you're developing an organization that's launching hundreds of items a year, it's really important to have a focus for your team, because if you're focusing on a product, you're really missing the big picture. The objective for me and our company is develop an innovation culture inside product development, and even more importantly, an innovation culture inside the company. So this little graphic, some of you may have heard of Simon Sinek. He's a popular speaker, and one of the things he talks about is this golden circle. So for kids too, our why is basically, I believe that all babies deserve our absolute best. Maybe all parents can't afford a premium product, but in every product that we develop, we need to be thinking about delivering the absolute best in terms of consumer experience, in terms of the insights that drive that product. And then, how do you do it? Design thinking. I'm not going to even start to talk about it with the person on my left.
You do it, you don't talk about it.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. But from my perspective, it's as simple as starting with consumer insights, but always keeping in mind consumer experience. Because I've seen a lot of great products that don't take into account the consumer experience, and then the brand is not authentic and it actually fails. And then what is the what? Okay, and the what obviously is, I'm in the consumer products world, so it's a lot of product. But if you can embed that culture inside your company, it doesn't just affect your product, but it affects your processes, not just in product development, but actually the culture that might, to the accountants of this world, to the lawyers, to the product development people. It really, starts changing the actual core of the company. And then lastly, the people that we have, and it could affect the way you recruit and the way you train, but also to how you interact with your customers. So it's a cultural mindset. So.
Great.
Yeah.
And I think we'll talk a lot about that. We'll go to Crystal and make sure you know who's on the panel. And then we'll talk about the culture, creating a culture of creators, and how you get that thinking dispersed throughout your organization. So Crystal Prasad from Little Bits. So Crystal is the director of product design at Little Bits. And if you don't know Little Bits, you should look it up. A lot of people are talking about it right now. And what I think is fascinating about this is that Little Bits is innovating one of those play products that many of us think is almost perfect on its own, the block. So she's creating, and I'll let Crystal talk a little bit more about Little Bits, but it's a platform of electronic building blocks that snap together with magnets to create inventions large and small. And this isn't just for kids, but it's about creating inventors out of all of us and empowering the kids of today, the adults of tomorrow, and maybe the adults of today to be inventors. Crystal also founded Group Hug, which you guys probably already talk, a design collective that seeks to tackle big societal problems through design. So that's another theme that goes through the societal benefit of some of the design work that we're doing. So I'm going to let Crystal show her example.
Yes. So I think one of the most important things that we talk about at Little Bits, and me, especially for a designer, I also love Lord of the Rings and memes. Hey. So I think one of the things to keep in mind is that anything you design and bring into the world, you're essentially changing people's behaviors, and it's something that you shouldn't take lightly, and you should take it very seriously. And I think as content creators and designers, we have a responsibility to make sure we're delivering like the best content and the most delightful experiences that change people's lives in a positive way. I think it's easy to forget that anything from like a paper clip to a shoe to an iPad really affects your behavior and the way you think and the solutions you think are out there. So I think, as a designer, that's something that excites and scares me at the same time. What a big influence we have when we create new products.
Great, thank you. We're going to get, we won't leave that picture on for too long because too many pictures, but I wanted to throw out to all of you, we've talked about, you're all great leaders and thinkers and innovators in your own right, but you also all lead teams to different degrees and in different contexts. So I thought maybe you could talk about the challenges, the opportunities, the things that work in creating a culture where innovation happens. and maybe some of the challenges and the mistakes, if you're willing to share some of those.
Okay. Well, like you said earlier, at Sesame Workshop, there has been quite a bit of change in the last year and a half. And one of the things that we set off doing is we wanted to make sure that we created a culture where people felt comfortable and empowered to actually put their ideas out to the public. And up until for the last decade, Sesame Workshop wasn't creating original content other than Sesame Street. And when the new president, Jeff Dunn, came aboard, he said that this is a production company and we want to make Sesame Street as great as it can be, but we also want to make content for other platforms and content that's original and unique and not just relying on the Sesame Street characters. So one of the first things that we did is we created this in-house, kind of like a competition, and we called it Kick Smarter. And what we did is we encouraged everyone in the company, from interns, people in finance, people in creative, the whole company was encouraged to pitch ideas against a creative assignment, which was basically create the next Sesame Street. How would we reimagine Sesame Street as an animated property? And we received over 60 submissions. It was clearly a very, very, it was really popular and people felt really excited about it. And then the goal is that we had the community, the whole company, vote on which of those 60 they felt had the most potential, and we're going to make 2 of those into like sizzles, and then we're going to test those sizzles, and they could turn into something else. We're not sure, but the idea was to really just get everyone in the company to feel like they had a voice and that they could be creative and innovative, even though their day job was not necessarily what you would imagine to be something that would really, lend itself to kind of creative content making. And we've done a number of other kind of programs like that, just again to keep everybody excited and engaged and feeling like they're part of this creative community.
Great, great. And how about the rest of you? Do you
I can build on
disperse
that.
innovation? Go ahead, Liz.
So for me, building on that, there's the things that you do, and then there's the space in which you work. And my favorite places to work are the ones that are not precious. And a particular story comes to mind, and that you can say to everybody, be innovative, be creative, work in teams, la da 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 da. But unless you act it, it just doesn't. It's a good bumper sticker. So we were having a brainstorm, and this man came up to me and was like, we're kind of constrained here. We're trying to lay out our ideas. And I looked at, we had just built out this space the night before with plywood and, low maintenance materials. And he was complaining about the space, and he clearly wanted me to fix it for him. And I looked at him, and without thinking too much, I looked down at my table of supplies, which was mostly like Sharpies and Post-it notes, but we had forgotten to put the electric screwdriver away, and that was underneath, and I just handed the screwdriver to him, and I said, take the wall down. And he looked at me like, the wall? I said, yeah, here, he's in a suit. Yeah, take the wall down. And he went over, and I had to teach him how to work it. Yeah, that was kind of fun. Anyway, I tried it, yeah. We had to take it down, and it was this moment for everybody of like, oh my gosh, yes, we can figuratively and literally take walls down. And the world did not fall apart, right? We were still okay. And I think that was the best thing, that was so much more impactful than having motivational quotes on the wall.
Yeah. I'll add to that too. I think it's a great example. And I think one of the chief inhibitors to constant innovation is actually success. As it's funny when you're a smaller company, and I've been with Kids Do for 15 years, and we were pretty small when we started, and now we're getting fairly large. And by survival, you're innovating. It's just literally survival. You want to bring innovative content constantly, and your risk is okay. And then you get successful, and you're making a lot of money. And you go, oh, wait. It's hard to be agile. So one of the things I encourage my team and encourage you all is don't punish failure. For me, product development failure is all part of product development. And I love the discussion we were having earlier. Because I do think there is such learnings that can come from mistakes. There's an item that is one of our most successful items, and it was an engineer screwing around with some technology, and he was trying to solve one particular problem, and it was a complete disaster, but had creative minds around it. And we said, okay, let's apply this technology over here. And I'm not going to get into the details, but it's now one of our most successful items. So you have to embrace that, because life in creation is failure is part of the mix. And you can't, obviously you have to be successful as a company, but being successful, you have to have a higher view and go, you know what, it's okay if someone fails. It's okay to take the chances, because you're not going to always get it right the first time.
And I can think of one. I love that too, because we definitely encourage failure, because once you fail, you get closer to the solution, I think. But one anecdote that I have is, I'm sure everyone suffers from like being in boring meetings all day. Like it's like a thing that happens in companies. And I always challenge my team and say like, new policy, no boring meetings. Like if the meeting is boring, just leave. Like no boring. Like especially at Little Bits, like there should be no reason that like anything you do should be boring or not like incredibly fun. And that should be your standard. Like fun all the time should be your standard of like life. And it's really interesting. Why not? And it's really interesting because it does challenge you to like figure out like, okay, I need to go over this product pricing. Like, how am I going to make it interesting? And it does like challenge you to think about that in a different way. And this might be too technical, but one of my favorite things that we do within my team is that we work on kind of a lean structure. So we have like a check-in and sprint pretty much every day. And there's this project that somebody made at Little Bits where it's called like a secret compartment box, where it's basically like a remote controlled box. So there's a control part that has a light sensor, and what I do is me or any of the other designers hides it in this room, and it's kind of like a scavenger hunt, and you have to find the control. And when you find the control and like let's say it's like under a hat and you pull it open, this little box swings open and has like breakfast in it. And that's like the best way to start your day. And I think it's, no boring. Zero tolerance for boring, I think.
So it sounds like play is an important part, which
Absolutely,
obviously this conference is about, but play is an important part of the process, not just the product.
Totally. I mean, I think happy designers make happy products, so yeah.
Great, good. Go ahead.
We have a lot of conversations about good versus great. So sort of keying off what you said, Peter, like we would much rather sort of shoot for the stars and try to achieve something vastly different than sort of, stay the course and, deliver something that's good or mediocre. I think Amazon also has a number of principles which sort of are infused into our daily life. And one of them is about thinking big. So we are, rewarded on how we can conceptually think about things in a different way. As a new division within Amazon, we very much function like a startup. So each and every person on my team, and it is very small, has multiple jobs. And if we don't have a process set in place, we sort of have to create one in that moment that sort of best suits the function.
Great. I'm going to throw a question out in the middle, and I would expect that we'll have slightly different perspectives on this, but when we talk about design and designing for kids, there are probably many people in the room and maybe on this panel who think that it is just like kids are a special category of people, that they require special kinds of thinkers, a specific kind of process, that they are different, that designing, creating for kids is different than designing and creating for anyone else. And some of you on the panel and some of you in the audience might think that that is not as much the case, or that is too extreme of a point of view. So I'm curious to hear you talk about that. And then maybe also, as part of that, throw in this idea of can you design for people of all ages, or do you have to design for very specific age groups? How different is that?
I design. I sort of approach our programming very much like Amazon as a retailer. So ultimately, I hope that there's something there for every age. 6 to 11 is an advertising demo. It's not, I don't believe, how kids watch television. A 6-year-old and an 11-year-old or a 12-year-old are very different. So when I think about kid product, I don't know that I think it needs to be completely different. Like I think there's a sophistication to what we do for kids, but I do believe that we have a responsibility, and for me, it's about impact. Like every bit of content that we put in front of children should have great and real impact. I think that, we look at our customers and we have to continue to earn trust with them. So they're putting their, children and our youngest customer in front of a screen. I want to make sure that there's a benefit that goes along with that, and it's not just an entertainment benefit.
I'll piggyback on you because I know we have a lot of similar thoughts, at the workshop as well. It's like everything that we make, it needs to be on mission. It needs to make kids smarter, stronger, and kinder, and it has to have measurable impact. But in terms of looking at the demo of kids in general, I think that it is hard to make something for a 3-year-old that also can work for an 11-year-old because they're completely different developmentally and in every way. And so at the workshop, we do quite a bit of research to make sure that what we are making for a 2 to 5-year-old or a 6 to 8-year-old or what have you is something that is just right in the pocket for them, and it's exactly right and catered and tailored specifically for that demo. And even looking at the 2 to 5 demo, there's a huge difference between a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. So what we have to do is when we're looking at the content that we're making, we have to be really clear on what our goals are, what the target audience, who the target audience is, and really just make sure that we're laser focused on that particular demo and not try to make one size fits all, because I just don't think that's possible for kids.
So I know I come from more of a background of thinking that you can design something so that humans can use it in general, and not necessarily just focusing on kids. But I will say that the way Little Bits, we did it on purpose. So when Little Bits was founded back in 2011, the mission was really to be a modular platform. So that's why all of our hardware is modular and it all works together. And I think where I do agree with you guys is that the content we create to pull those modules together tends to be very focused. And I love describing modularity in terms of cooking because it's really easy to understand. But let's say you have a set of ingredients, you can cook something very complex with it, or you can cook something very, very simple. So in the same way with Little Bits, you can create a flashlight, which is essentially like a battery, a button, an LED, very, very simple. Or you can use the same pieces and create like an internet-connected pet feeder, which is something more complex. So we try to make sure all of the avenues are open, and but making sure we have clear examples of how it can work for different age groups. Yeah.
I guess we'll go down the line here.
Yeah, you're next.
I'll start off with a story, actually, and answer the first part of your question. And that is, do you need experience in the baby products or the children products industry to be successful? By the way, I would never recommend you doing this, but when I was interviewing with my boss 15 years ago, I was recruited in, and they for some reason, my boss said, hey, I want to interview this guy. And during the interview, I literally stopped him, and I said, his name is Ryan, and I said, Ryan, do you realize I don't have any juvenile products experience whatsoever? I've actually done robots and factory automation and all that. I'm like, you probably could find someone that actually has experience in the field and that, that may be a better fit. So I wouldn't recommend you ever doing that in an interview. But one of the things he said, and it's one of the reasons I came to work for the company, is he says, I don't want someone from the industry right now. I want someone who thinks differently. Mm-hmm. And I think that's awesome. And I think in our industry, our industry is like 0 to 3. There's a lot of players have been the same, and I think it's so important to bring outside points of view in. Mm-hmm. I think it's also critical that you have the child development and the industry experts alongside you, but bringing people and being purposeful about it, bringing them into the culture is extremely important. Whether that's people just right out of school or from other industries, because, I'm in business to make money, and our industry is very competitive, and they're not necessarily generating more babies every year. Okay, so you have to think differently about your field, and we've been very, very fortunate to be able to do that and been very successful at it. But it takes a different mindset, and so I just really encourage from the innovators here to be looking outside of just the industry, because there's so much, whether that is I brought in people from automotive and people right out of school and people in textiles, and just to get a different point of view when you're going and approaching a problem, because it's not a singular point of view that's going to solve a problem, because everyone's given the same information, and now it's what you do with the information that's going to really, really matter. So.
Great. So I've designed products for people who are 0 to people who are 100. And so one thing, when I actually worked in the toy industry, and one thing I struggled with was exactly what you said, this like 6 to 12. I was like, what's 6 to 12? I now have a 6-year-old, and the 6 and an 8-year-old, they're completely different. And I just thought it was BS. So my fundamental interest in design is that you should always do contextual interviewing. So building off what you said, you can't, I remember we had these books around that were like, what kids think? And it was written by somebody who was, who'd written the book because of the publishing industry, like 2 years earlier. Things were radically changing. So I think you actually have to go out that day, that week, that month, whenever you're doing the work, and actually see what's happening. You cannot rely on any report or work that's been, of course yes, you will rely on prior knowledge, but to not do in-contextual interviews and hang out in the playrooms and hang out at the stores and hang out on the, at the gym, the kid gyms, like that's totally ridiculous to me. So I guess, and when you first asked your question, Amy, all I could think of is the other day, I introduced my daughter to Tina Turner. She didn't know her. And we were like rocking out to Tina Turner playing with Legos. And I was thinking to myself, okay, here's what age demographic are we? Like, how are you gonna like categorize us? I realize we're not the mass market. Like, you're probably not making a lot of money on us. But it was like, everybody's a little different. And so you have to get, and also times change. So. Yeah. We were listening to Rhapsody. We weren't listening to my old LP. Like, you have to get the whole system to understand what's happening and how you can design for them.
All right, so if you see Tina Turner Legos on the shelf, I think Lego is here.
Exactly. Brilliant. It was like mom-daughter bonding.
I'm gonna give you a choice because sadly we're already running out of time, and I want to get to your last slide because I think it's always useful for people to know who you admire, because there's probably a lot of people in the audience who admire you guys. So here's my last question, and then we'll move into that. Either you can answer, what is a big misconception about innovation as it relates to kids? Or, and maybe they're the same, what do you think is the role of digital, or what should the role of digital, and I use that in the most sacrilegious way possible, digital, smart toys, AR, VR, everything together. What is the right role of that, in your opinion, for kids? Multiple, choose your own adventure.
I would say I think a big misconception, I actually don't know if it's true with this crowd, but I think a big misconception I hear when going out and doing user testing and talking to people is that concepts, if you're designing, like for example, for Little Bits, if we're designing a kit or a product for kids, that it has to be simpler, which I don't think is true at all. I think kids are obviously a lot smarter than everyone probably thinks they are, and they have like a huge capacity to learn new things. So that's something we've seen where especially for me, like we'll go out and test a project and I'll see it before it goes out and be like, oh my God, that's so complicated. Like, I don't know how it's gonna go. And then, the team comes back and is like, it went great. Like, they loved it, they got it, they got all the concepts. So I think that's always like, never underestimate what they can do.
Great.
Yeah, I would piggyback on that and say that, yes, kids are a lot more sophisticated than what we sometimes give them credit. But on the flip side, sometimes we can be more sophisticated and forget that a 3-year-old, is still wearing diapers at night. Some of them are, you know what I mean? So sometimes I think that we can sometimes, because of our own goals and our own thoughts about technology and how we want to be innovative and we want to really push it, we also, again, as you'd mentioned, you've got to get out there and you've got to test it and you've got to research it and see what really kids are gravitating towards. Because sometimes the simpler, the more clear-cut, the slower pace, that's something that is just as fine as well. So I just think that it really, really takes a lot of thought and really getting out there and just seeing who the audience is.
I guess I'll tackle the digital one. It's important to note that I think, 4 years ago when I came to Amazon, I left the sort of traditional television space because I thought it was dying. And when tablets were introduced now, I guess 7 or 8 years ago, I was in line to get the first iPad because I thought it was important for my kids to sort of experience that and grow with it. And it really enabled me to actually see how their consumption was changing. I work a lot with Dr. Alice Wilder, and for years I'm like, kids are different now. They're different today than they were 10 years ago. And she's like, no, they're not. I'm like, yes, they are. They have to be. Like, I just see how they're sort of, consuming things in a very different way. So, as the role of the digital network, like I really think for us, it puts kids in the driver's seat, I think, which is really empowering. So that's all I have to say.
I'll answer that just a little broader. Let's talk about technology in general. I mean, given I have an engineering background, I mean, I love technology in every form, fashion, but I think our industry sometimes grabs on technology and puts it in product for technology's sake. It's a gizmo, it's a gadget. It doesn't really have a strong purpose behind it, and I think that's a huge mistake. Huge mistake. I think sometimes, and I think I'm seeing in our industry, in the under 3, people actually kind of rebelling against it because some first players, they go and say, hey, you know what, let's have this technology, I'm just going to bolt this on, and they're not thinking through what's truly understand the consumer, the baby, and in our case, the mom and the dad, and really apply it with integrity and authenticity, as you mentioned before. I think it's so important. At the same time, I've been in our industry for now 15 years, and I remember when I was starting in the industry, I was always, the paradigm was, what technology is out there that I can afford to apply into our market? And it was kind of refining, almost limiting the type of solutions. And now we're in an age which is so exciting for me personally, is that now I can think about the core consumer and the opportunity, okay, on what the opportunity is to bring innovation, what is that concept, and I don't have to think, I'm not limited necessarily by the technology. So it's a complete shift in mindset and development, because I can go, okay, I have this objective to unlock baby's potential, and at the broadest term, and with toys and gear, what would be this ecosystem look like? And how do I leverage that? And not be limited with, oh, you know what, is there a technical solution? Because sensing technology and the Internet of Things and connectivity in general and the digital is getting so affordable and so easy for a developer to do, it just enables it. So I'm personally very excited of where the industry can go, but just caution our industry and my team always is, it has to be authentic, it has to be real, it has to be with a greater purpose in mind, because consumers immediately can see through it. So.
All right, Liz, if you have anything to add.
So I come from a couple different perspectives on this. I train the people that you hire to be your designers and go in. And the number one thing that they do is typically jump to what's the app for that? Like I joke, what's the app for picking your nose? I'm like, we don't need that. It just doesn't, it's not needed. I'm sorry. I work a lot with 18 to 22-year-olds, so you have to have this kind of humor, right? And it's just, we don't always need that. And I guess this is going to go back to the pencil up there, is I see, especially in terms of creative expression, I see digital getting so much in the way. I have students who are struggling to figure out how to use Photoshop and these complex programs, and I'll be like, here's a pencil, draw your idea. Let's get it down. And so I really struggle with technology. I am a technologist. I research in this area. I study the benefits of it, really, and for information exchange and creativity. And yet I see our increasing dependence on it actually paralyzing our very essence of who we are as humans.
Can I just piggyback, though, on that for a second? Because I think for me, the idea that digital content can be wherever and whenever enables then families to look at how they're going to spend their off time differently. Like the idea that we can stop our programs and encourage kids to go outside, that they're not tied to this linear broadcast. I guess for me, I don't think of it in a sort of this black and white world. It can be both. It doesn't have to be exclusively digital. It doesn't have to be exclusively.
So there's a role of digital.
There's a
but
role.
It's not,
I'm sorry. I didn't.
It's not
yes.
a right or a wrong.
Yeah.
Right.
There is a role.
Yeah, there's a role.
There's a role. It just doesn't have to be continuous,
Right.
is my point of view.
No, we're going to rattle through this because we're getting the 5-minute sign. I think given this conversation, I'm very interested in how many of your examples are technology oriented and not that there's a right or a wrong. So when we talk about I admire, somebody, something, Crystal, you're up first.
Oh, okay. Does anyone here play with Tiny Bop? Anyone? Yay. Yeah, I love their apps because I mean, from a designer perspective, they're so beautiful. Like, they're like unapologetically just deep, immersive, and gorgeous. So I love just exploring them. And I think what they're doing, this is an example, I think this is like the DIY Monster app where you can create your own creatures. But I love how open-ended and free they are. You can basically do whatever you want. Like, I was playing with, they have a new Earth app. I was playing with it the other day. And I accidentally like touched a mountain and like a goat appeared. And I was like, whoa, like I didn't know that could happen. So it's just very fun and playful. I really like it. Yeah.
All right. Pete.
One of the people I really admire is a guy by the name of David Butler, and he's the head of innovation at Coca-Cola, actually. And the reason I really like him is he's been able to take design thinking, process it down for the everyday business person. And I think one of the key things that he talks about here, which I really resonate, is in an organization, just because you don't have the word designer in your title, you can still be a a designer, okay? And it's the way you think. He's actually, we've been fortunate enough that he's on our board of advisors, on our design board. So he's a fantastic gentleman, but he really brings a paradigm into the market. So he's great.
All right, Kay.
The Tide Pod.
That's a good one.
I think that this is like brilliant. It's simple, it's useful. I like the way that it feels, and it gets the job done. And for me, that's what design needs to be. It's like simple, it does what you need it to do.
All right, great.
Nice.
Liz. Liz has two.
So there's this great new show out. It's called Butterflies. You have to go to the national parks to see it and sit on the dirt ground and watch butterflies come up to you and just waver around with their little wings. Amy asked me this, I don't know, I had just gotten back from a trip to Mammoth Caves, and I spent with my daughter an hour looking at these butterflies just fluttering around. And for me, nature has always just been incredibly inspiring. I mean, just from a design standpoint, like just aesthetically appreciate these things. And then from an engineering standpoint, right, they weigh nothing. And then they get up in the air and they fly. I'm like endlessly amazed by these creatures, and any creature.
All right, I'm gonna.
Oh, so Amy also
to
wrote this to me when I was, it was spring break. Does anybody see what this says? The iPad is not, it's actually working. This is my kindergartner. It was spring break. Netflix was my babysitter. And I was in a meeting at work and, set my kids up in my office, Netflix, I put it all up there. And I was like, okay, just cross my fingers, hopefully you'll be okay. And at one point I was in the middle of the meeting and this note came in with my son, and he handed it to me. And I work in design, I work in a design and engineering building and with all these colleagues, and they all know my kids by now. And I said, excuse me, there's a technical issue. And I walked out, and it was this love. I admire my children greatly for navigating technology with grace and ease, navigating the workplace. I think what we put on our children and so much more complicated than it has been in the past. And so I greatly admire my children and their ability to express technological breakdowns through writing on a Post-it note, right? I mean, so I was proud. I was both guilty because Netflix was a babysitter and proud that my son was writing a note to me.
With a pencil. With a pencil.
True, I know. He couldn't, you know what? Yeah, there's a long story behind that. But yes, he's into pen.
This is our last one. It's Tara. Tara, when I click this, oh no, it's me, but okay, I'm gonna do mine. So I have, I'm trying to keep my own mouth shut and let you listen to all these people. Go Noodle is a great example from my perspective. If you don't know Go Noodle, I think it's a great example of a content platform that takes curriculum that is both appropriate for school and also really entertaining and marries them. And Go Noodle's philosophy, it's a lot of videos, exercises, games that help kids channel their energy in the right ways. It doesn't calm them down, it doesn't rev them up, it does whatever kind of helps kids manage their own energy and control their own bodies. And I actually got introduced to this through my son's teacher. So teachers are people I admire, especially the really progressive ones who are looking to use technology in the classroom in the right way. And I just thought PSFK, if you don't get their newsletter, that's where we get all kinds of great examples of design. But Tara, this is you. This is your video, yeah.
So I think if it had to just be one image, it probably would be a child like jumping in a puddle or like dumping like mud on themselves. I think we continue to be inspired by our customer and kids for, you know, a path to content creation. And the other piece of that equation are the creators that we work with, that we give them a platform. And so this is a clip of Androids, a show, a live action show. It's a hybrid live action CG show that was created for a transitional preschool audience. It has a serialized story, which I don't think you saw a lot in that demographic. And recently, as Amy mentioned, we just got 10 Emmy nominations, I think, because their approach is so unique. But it really encourages kids to be kids. It encourages them to take risks. It encourages them to think about failure in a completely different way. And it inspires me.
Androids. Ready, Anne. Add your additional power. This is incredible amazing! We're losing Pal!
We failed.
We didn't fail. We just discovered another way of doing it wrong.
Watch out for that rock!
Yeah, duck! Ooh. Hi, Anne! Pal! Hello!
Maybe it's time for a new experiment?
Blast up!
So you're like smart and stuff.
I'm a scientist. I like studying the world and stuff.
I'm not sure if we have any time for questions. Okay, great, good.
Question?
Oh.
Did we answer them all?
I'm curious about when you talk about the age range of the problem of getting it right in the center or, you know, on the either side, where the parent falls in this. I'm a parent myself, and so I think it's sort of interesting. Sometimes we overestimate what they can do, but I think a lot of times we underestimate, and we're sort of playing it safe, almost like a lowest common denominator. And so sometimes I feel really the adults in the room are the clutter, and we need to sort of step out of the way. And I just wondered if one of you wanted to comment on how that affects your thinking, either spending a lot of time around kids and designing these products.
Did everybody hear that,
Yeah.
first of all? Oh. A question about, I'm going to succinctly say, about parents and the role of adults and how we think about them in the design process, and sometimes adults being the clutter in that process. Yeah.
I mean, we look at both in the equation. Certainly, our online testing, you know, is mostly targeting the parent for feedback, right? Because a 3-year-old is not going to type into Amazon.com, I really like this show, I'd like you to do this, this, and this. But we actually did more traditional focus group testing so we could see how kids were responding. You know, and I think like any research, you sort of take what you, or not like any research, let me rephrase that. For a kids' television research, you sort of, there are bits and pieces that you take and you absorb and you're able to implement change. And there's other things where, as a parent, you're not a television producer and you might, be a little bit more on the conservative side. I think a show like Androids, I'm sure there's some parents that are reacting pretty negatively to us showing kids blowing stuff up. But you know what? Like, that's how kids learn, and I think, we need to encourage them to take risks. Otherwise, they won't be doing it as adults, and then how have we prepared them for this sort of ever-changing world?
Any other questions? All right, well, then, thank you, guys. This was great. Is this on? Can you hear me? Yes, okay. We're about to have our break. The bathrooms, as I said, are across from the elevators to the right. And as we come back in, everybody's going to get a little surprise. So make sure you go out and come back in. And again, and I want to encourage you, we have a raffle. So if you stop at the registration desk, make sure you register for the raffle. Drop your business card in. And any other questions, just find us and someone will help you. Thanks.